let's have a look at this. We're only going to play 50 seconds of this clip because I think our conversation around being a country and being a business is all synopsized in this one conversation. Daniel Faitawa asks Mr. Luxon a question around about how many houses are they going to sell off. And he doesn't actually answer the question, ironically, but this will give us the gist of the start of our conversation. Here we go.
So tell me, how many state houses are you going to sell off?
Well, this argument that, as we've said before, we want to see an increase in what's called social housing. Social housing is provided through state houses through Kāinga Ora, but also through many community housing providers as well. But really what we announced yesterday was to say, look, Kāinga Ora is the biggest landlord in the country. It has a huge responsibility to house our most vulnerable New Zealanders. And it's been doing a very poor job of that. There's been poor
financial management. So let me just come back to my first question there, Prime Minister. How many state houses are you going to sell off?
Again, that hasn't been the focus of our review. What our review has focused on is actually saying we've got to make sure that KO is a high-performing organisation, which it currently isn't, and it needs to be financially sustainable. It needs a massive turnaround plan, and it needs a refreshed board and a new chairman, which is what we've announced yesterday.
So that's the gist of the conversation we're going to have today, because there are some interesting phrases that our Here List leader uses. One of them, of course, was financially sustainable. Yes, I think we all agree that public money needs to be spent wisely, that you need to have, be responsible with it, and you need to get good bang for your buck. But the vibe that I'm getting, and I feel that others are getting as well, is when you hear Mr. Luxon, who sold his virtues as being a good prime minister because he sat on boards, did business, when he says financially sustainable, the feeling I get is the money put into it needs to repeat itself and then pay for itself. And that doesn't feel like what a housing system for people who need it, a social housing system, would be. So let's just throw you the ball, Matthew, and we talk about country. This country should not be run as a business. We are a country, and you are more than welcome to tie it into Kāinga Ora. The floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, look, by the time I think he got to that interview, he'd figured out how to pronounce Kāinga Ora, because in the other media stand-ups he did this morning was KO.
He calls it KO in this as well. He does call it KO in this.
He does a lot of KO. So, first of all, get your narrative right. It's a Māori word. It's okay to speak in Māori, and I think he's afraid of it, as are many of his ministers. But, look, Kāinga Ora is an entity under the Crown Entities Act of 2004. And I get that people want to see the state-owned enterprises and Crown entities and Tamir and all this other sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, they're not businesses. These organizations, or this organization, is meant to be in the business of assisting and supporting the most vulnerable in our community, who just so happens, sadly, with the amount of rent that people are having to pay from their weekly income, which is for many people above 50%, no matter the age or ethnicity. When you're in that vulnerable stage, the last thing you want to do is have the Christine rankification of what used to be Housing New Zealand at your door saying, pay up or get out. And the other thing I found really strange about this sort of interview of trying to corporatize housing in New Zealand is actually, I think people are confused between what is state housing and what is social housing. The government should be in the business of building state houses because that's who we are. That's our whakapapa. We do this in order to house the most vulnerable, as I keep on saying, in our community. And I think Luxon's got a little bit off the mark. In the AM show interview this morning, for example, he was confused at who was going to be appointing the new board directors who apparently are all losing their jobs in July. Is it the incoming board chair from Spark? Is it this? Is it that? So if you've got to run things like a business, at least know what the business structure is before you start saying, well, this is how things are going to be. I thought that was a bit crazy. So, yeah, I mean, I think we've lost that Michael Joseph Savage impetus around why we have the welfare social safety net in this country. And then just to save a confusion, sorry, I'm on a rant, I'm on a roll. It's this whole, to be frank, I don't know if I can swear, but this whole bollocks of saying, social housing, community housing. No, the other reason the government's in the business of doing this is because it's an asset that not only belongs to the people, it sits in our books. So in times of need, when we do need to go and borrow money for other things to pay for other things, then we've got stuff sitting in our books, similar to how if you want a new kitchen in your home and you go back to the bank and say, look, I want to borrow more against my home or the equity that I've got in my home, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So And to be frank, I mean, you can hardly claim that running Air New Zealand is in the world of business. I mean, Air New Zealand in and of itself has been rescued how many multiple times by the taxpayers now? I mean, I remember the old debacle under, I think his name was Jeff Toomey and ANZ Australia. Need I bring that hoo-ha up? That was the first bailout. The next bailout came not soon after that. And again, soon after, all of a sudden, he's claiming credentials for having run in New Zealand. I wouldn't. I mean, somebody with a dodgy CV and embellishment, apparently. I wouldn't put that on my CV. I wouldn't cast that about. So I think he's being a little bit loose with the conversation, to be frank.